What is up, internet? I'm Spear and it's good to be back. In my latest track I used a flute sound, and those kind of sounds are very popular right now, so I thought I'd make a quick video on it. The sound I'm talking about is this one. Now of course those flute sounds gained a lot of popularity due to genres like tropical house taking off, so it's much more likely you'll hear a sound like that in a context rather like this one. Since getting that sound out of Reason is quite simple, we'll also take a look at how we can make the sound as expressive as it can be in the sequencer. But first, let's pull it up in the rack. And as I was saying, that's really quite easy. All we need to do is pull up the browser, and in our browser we'll go into the factory sound bank, pull up the NNXT sampler patches, and in the read and pipe subfolder we will find the pan flute preset. Now all we need to do is double click that and we're good to go. Well, almost. We still need to apply some basic mixing to the signal to make it sound a bit smoother. So first up, we will create an equalizer. Now, depending on which note range we want to use for our melody, we will use our equalizer differently. For example, I'm using notes between C4 and C5 for my melody, and if we pull up our Spectrum EQ, we can see that those notes usually have quite a big peak at about 1K. That's 800 to 1K hertz. So a peak that big will probably give us a headache during mastering, and it will definitely mess with the ears of our listeners if we leave it like that. So let's fix that using parameter 1 on our EQ. We will bring up the frequency to about 900 Hz, reduce the gain to about -7.5 dB, and we will also bring down the Q a bit to about 2.5. So the frequency band affected by this parameter is bigger and broader, because we want the whole melody to be affected and not just a single note. So reducing the Q just broadens this frequency band and results in the whole melody being affected. Then we'll select the second parameter, bring that one up to about 3.4K, just because there are some very harsh frequencies sitting up there, and we want to get rid of those. Right, if we do a quick A-B comparison, we can hear that we've already cleaned up our signal pretty good. Sweet. Next up we'll use the high shelf and just boost it by about 4 dB. That will just bring a bit more air into the sound and make it brighter. Awesome. Now that we've cleaned up the signal, let's chuck in a reverb unit, and it's of course an RV700. Open up the programmer and choose the convolution algorithm. I've really come to like that one, especially on the preset 1 sample. And when we boost the high EQ a little bit and therefore introduce more high frequencies into the reverb tail, it sounds even better. Do be careful though, because too many high frequencies in a reverb tail will definitely mess with your mix, and it won't sound good in the end. So be careful, but just bring it up by a little bit. Of course, we will also reduce the dry wet to about 48. And already we have a very nice atmosphere going. Last but not least, we will chuck in a compressor, which we'll use to just very gently compress the signal to even out the levels between the individual notes that might be hit with different velocities, and also to bring up the reverb tail a bit more. So I'm just going to adjust the threshold until I reach a gain reduction of about -4 decibel. We can even bring that up a bit to about -29 dB. It's very gentle compression. You can of course try your own settings if you don't agree with mine. I'll just bring down the attack a little bit and also the release so that the reverb tail comes right up after we release a note. And then I'm going to give the output gain just a little bit, so bringing it up to about 6 dB, because as we can see the input, or rather the signal coming out of the NNXT, is quite low. Alright, that's it for the rack. Now that we have our flute sound going, let's see what we can do with it in the sequencer. So let me just quickly draw in a clip right here. And we will just use a small sample melody. I'm just gonna change the color of this clip to something more dark so you can see the lines better. Great. Let's just draw in the same melody that we used for the example earlier. So that's using a 1/16 snap. That's not quite right. There we are, that should be better. Alright. Let's take a listen. As you can see, it's the same melody as we use here in our example down here, but it does sound a lot more boring. If we take a quick listen. That's because we haven't applied a couple of cool techniques to this MIDI clip to make it sound a lot more expressive and a lot more interesting. And I'm going to just quickly go over these techniques right here so you can get your tropical house groove going as well. The first method I like to use to create more interesting and more expressive melodies is to introduce shuffle to the MIDI clip. Now there's a lot of ways you can do that. I've covered some in tutorials in the past. But the easiest way I found is just to switch up your snap to 1/32 triplets and then move back every other offbeat note by 1/32 triplet. For example, in these 3 notes here, I can just select the middle one and move it back. And this way we create a nice swing, a nice shuffled groove that will make the sound more interesting. I will do the same on this note right here. And already we have made the melody a lot livelier. And a lot bouncier as well. Another thing we can do is use the velocity down here to just change up a couple of notes so that they sound softer or harder. Remember, we do have a compressor on this signal, so reducing the velocity will not necessarily make it a lot quieter, but it will change up the sound quality so it will sound smoother, and when the velocity is very high, it will sound harder. And this way we can change up the character of our melody and make it more interesting in the process. Again, on these 3 notes here in quick succession, I will just make it so that the velocity of the lowest note is the lowest, and of the highest note, it's the highest. And this way we have this nice kind of swell going, and we can still hear the lowest notes, which is very important. Don't go overboard and reduce the velocity by so much that you can't hear the note anymore. We will just have it a little bit lower so it's still quite loud enough, especially with the compressor working. But we can definitely hear the difference between the lowest and the highest note just in hardness. And that makes for some very interesting melodies. I'll just make a couple of adjustments here, making this a little bit softer and this a bit harder, and applying similar treatment to the rest of the notes right here. And yeah, that should already sound a lot more interesting. Sweet. There are still 2 more ways we can change up this clip so it sounds more interesting and more expressive. Both of them use automation. So we go back into the rack and just alt-click the pitch bend and modulation wheel on our NNXT to create the respective automation lines in the sequencer. Now first up we'll use the mod wheel and draw clips below all the longer notes. So I'll just start right here. This note is a little bit longer than the rest, and I will apply some mod wheel treatment to that, drawing in a clip and opening that up. I will just add an anchor point right down here and move up during the clip, during the note, and at the end of the note I will just move down again. What the mod wheel on this patch does is it applies a tremolo effect to the signal, so to the flute, which means that an LFO is activated that then modulates the volume. And that makes the whole thing sound a lot more alive, and it introduces a movement into the sound which wasn't there before. Like I said, I've applied this to every longer note in the clip, and now I'm going to move on to the last bit, which is also the trickiest and most effective bit at making this whole thing more expressive and more interesting. It's using the pitch bend wheel to create this nice kind of bird chirping twitch effect. And all we need to do for that is we choose a couple of notes which we want to put an emphasis on and draw a clip below those. And inside this clip, I'm going to turn off the snap by pressing S or hitting the snap up here. And this way I can now draw in anchor points free-handedly. And I'm going to draw in a little hill, or rather a big hill, because it goes all the way up, right at the start of the note that I want to put emphasis on. You just let out your inner Bob Ross and draw in a happy little hill. Make sure though that the anchor points at the bottom are at 0 and not above or below. Alright, let's take a listen to that. As you can hear, we now have this very interesting sound going, like birds chirping, and it actually adds a very, very nice dynamic to this whole melody. I'm going to copy this little clip over to some of the other notes I want to put emphasis on, and let's take a listen. Don't go overboard. If you put it on everyone, it will sound boring again, so just put it on some of the notes and you will have a very interesting and expressive melody going. And this little trick is what most tropical house producers use to make their flute sounds more interesting and more expressive. Of course, if you're using a MIDI keyboard and you're jamming out your melody, you can use all of the techniques I've just described while recording, you know, all the shuffle and velocity things, you have control over that with a MIDI keyboard. And using the pitch bend wheel, you just have to nudge it all the way up when you at the start of hitting a note, and then instantly release it. It'll just snap right back into position, and it will create just one of those curves right here. In fact, I have recorded the lower melody using my MIDI keyboard, and you see those are the automation lines just created by nudging the pitch bend wheel all the way up when hitting a note and instantly releasing it so it snaps back. And this way we create this nice kind of twitchy effect. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Using those 4 techniques, shuffling, velocity control, mod wheel, and pitch bend automation, we can create very nice and expressive flute lead lines. Cool. If this tutorial was useful to you, please leave a like, it helps a lot. Also consider subscribing for future tutorials, and I can promise right now that there will be future tutorials and it will not take me a year this time to create the next one, I promise. Right, have a good one of whatever you're having, guys. See you next time.